Welcome back. Well, the fintechs were not left out as the central bank governor also spoke about a new framework for payment service policies. Joining us now for analysis is Mr. Babatunde Akinmoses, CEO, Sycamore.ng. Join us via Zoom. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So definitely the governor had a lot to say about payment service banks and the fintechs. Paint a picture of the current framework for payment service banks at this time. He did talk about some going outside their licenses at this time. Tell us some more about this.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what the CBN governor said specifically was around the payment service framework generally, right? So there are different licenses. There are the payment service banks, like you mentioned, but there are also the payment service providers. And if you're even looking broadly at fintechs, some fintechs even operate as microfinance banks. So what he's basically saying is, if there is a license for a particular purpose, it should be used for that purpose, because there's been a tendency for people to sort of color around the gray lines or the gray areas, as it were, to undertake services that their licenses do not permit. So not just specifically for the payment service banks, but payment service providers and fintechs in general. And I think that's a very important consideration right now, because we have over 200 fintechs in Nigeria. Perhaps not all of them are specifically regulated by the CBN, and some of them are also regulated by the SEC as well. So the drive now is to make sure that your license is for a particular purpose. That's what they are doing, and you're not going outside what you've been approved for. Yeah, so that's what the governor was saying.
And what are you expecting for regulation now when it comes to fintechs? You see some licenses being revoked and big sanctions coming.
Yeah, that's a possibility. In fact, before the current administration, just on the eve of when the administration was leaving, you will recall that a lot of over 100 microfinance bank licenses were revoked, and one of the reasons that was given, even if it was quite broad, was compliance with some requirements. So if there's going to be a general shakedown for commercial banks, definitely microfinance banks are not going to be left out. Payment services providers are not going to be left out, and we're just going to see more a continuing shake-up of the industry to make sure that there's compliance and everything is in check. I think it's also important to mention that it's going to be all encompassing, right? Like I mentioned before, that not just payment service banks, payment service providers, and fintech players generally that require those licenses to operate.
Right, and with this kind of regulation coming, how do you think Nigerians or customers should interact with these fintechs right now as we await some of these changes when it comes to regulation?
I think the first is, and I like the fact that CBN mentioned that it's not running away from technology. In fact, it wants technology to be at the forefront of the development, right? So it's not a case of staying away from fintechs. It's a case of embracing and making sure that fintechs are compliant with the law. Because what we've seen now is that even the big commercial banks are spinning off fintech arms, right? So from the pronouncement by the CBN governor, I think it's just more vigilance on the part of the consumers to make sure that they are dealing with entities that are compliant with the law, and they are dealing with entities that are also providing the services that are allowed for by their licensing. So we're going to see a lot more technology. We're going to see a lot more encouragement, even from the CBN, for fintechs to embrace more technology, but while being compliant with the law at the same time. Because just as we discussed in the past, this is a sector that has brought direct investment to the country over $1 billion in the last just 2 or 3 years, right? So it's important that we keep the sector thriving, so that we could achieve that $1 trillion economy eventually.
Right. So much to aim for at this time. Well, we hope the fintechs actually do well with compliance going forward. Thank you so much for coming on, Babatunde Akinmoses, CEO, Sycamore.ng. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.